uber expensive cars. They are beautiful, and depending on your interpretation, they certainly make a statement. But history has shown they have a completely different role. They inspired design and technology for the subsequent 20 years after their introduction. Let's get the name, rank, and serial number out of the way right at the top. This, an entirely new Bugatti, which, if I'm doing the math correct, comes around once every, say, 10 years, at least in modern times. This, the Tourbillon. Apologies if I have mispronounced that name, but this, it's not gonna be our usual tech review where I give you like the bullets and numbers and we talk about like the cool mechanical bits. We're gonna geek out. This is gonna be old-fashioned car nerd kind of stuff. So really, what is it? This, believe it or not, is a plug-in hybrid. But unlike like a Toyota Prius Prime, it is a tour de force. It's like a Revuelto on steroids. It takes what the Revuelto does in concept and kind of blows it away. Or I don't know if I can say this nicely, kind of craps on the doorstep of the Revuelto. And there's a couple of reasons for that. First and foremost, just look at it. This, from a design perspective, it is a thing of beauty, and really video and pictures don't do this car justice. The first thing you notice, it is significantly lower than the Chiron that it replaces, and they do that through a number of different tricks here. Number one, there's some changes on the interior, we'll get to that. But overall, the car is lower, which changes the proportions. Like you look at the wheels, come over here and look at the wheels. This is the car nerd stuff. It's 20, 21 in the back, like the base Revuelto or like a base 911, but look at how much bigger they look here because the car is so much lower. Like my 911 is like a pickup truck up here. Now this is where we get to the point where we have to discuss some details because the details of function dictate the design. Like if we look over here, yeah, we said the thing is lower to the ground, but the designers in Molsheim, they had to come up with this whole idea of how do we make the frontal impact, basically what meets the wind, how do we make that smaller? And they took some design inspiration from birds, specifically falcons, which I had no idea that's the fastest animal on Earth. I thought it was a cheetah, but you know, foolish me. And so they've made this look like the profile of a falcon, bringing its wings inside, basically diving into its prey. But then there's some details of, okay, how do we get to, you ready for this? 236 miles an hour is the Vmax. However, that's if you have like the peasant's key. If you have the special key, 276 miles an hour. That's where you have to have details of getting air around the car in a very specific way. The first thing is you got to keep the car on the ground because this effectively will become a wing and could like pick itself up. So they have air going through the grille here. This doesn't cool the engine, which is back there. All this does is come up through the body panels, carbon fiber, and then runs the air over the car, pushing the car down. So that's the downforce. Then how do you get the air to the V16, not the W16, the V16 in the back? We'll talk more about that later. You go through this vent underneath the headlamp, which goes back into the V16. I mean, it's these kind of details that you can't help but nerd out about until you see the car in person. And then while we're talking about nerdy details, a carbon fiber windshield wiper. Like all of this is carbon fiber. The structure of the vehicle, it's a carbon fiber tub, which we completely expect. Then the whole frontal area, it's a separate carbon fiber piece. So now let's get back to the function impacting the form. We talked about the whole structure being carbon fiber. We talked about the body panels being carbon fiber, but it's still a plug-in hybrid. which means you have a 16-cylinder engine, which is very long, and then you have a transmission which is longitudinally mounted, so not like the Revuelto, where it's like a Miura, where they put it transverse to make it shorter. So this whole thing is here, which makes this a heavy car. Now, this with fluids weighs the same as a Revuelto, and here's the punchline. That is like 3 or 4 pounds lighter than the Chiron, which doesn't have the second propulsion system. So how do they do that? Well, they make the body panels thinner because the entire structure is carbon fiber. And you can imagine, this isn't like carbon fiber that was in an Alpha 4C. This carbon fiber is made of frankincense and myrrh because of the price of the car. So they can make the body panels thinner, which is one of the bits that contribute to the overall lower weight of the car. Well, how much does all this cost to get all this wonderful lightweighting? I am deliberately waiting till the end of the episode to share that number with you. But of course, there has to be more lightweighting to hide the entire weight of a second propulsion system, and that extends to the suspension. As you can imagine, this has double wishbones, but how do they get to the double wishbones? They 3D print the aluminum double wishbones all the way around. Now, this car, it's kind of like a China doll. It's a roller. This is a pre-production prototype. I would love to be able to take the wheel off and show you these pieces. Rather, I will have Brett, who runs post-production, find something from Bugatti so you can see them, because what I want to do is take them off the car and put them on my wall in my hangar as art. This is where you have to excuse me. This is where my car nerd, my aviation nerd, and my watch nerd all just collide, because it's all here. Let's start with the aviation stuff. There are toggle switches. Actually, there are no screens that you can see. There's a screen, but it pops up here, vertical, and then flips horizontal, and the only reason they have it is because legally you need a backup camera. That's it. Everything else is through toggle switches and beautifully knurled knobs. So the aviation part of it is, you even have toggle switches up here on the roof, but this is doing two things. It's not just reinforcing, oh my God, are you an av geek? It's reinforcing a long-held Bugatti design trick, which was started by the Atlantique, where like literally two pieces came together because of function. That was the only way to bind those two pieces. So here, they're rendering it by the spine of the car, which does culminate with a center-high stop mount in the back, but here they even duplicate it on the inside, where it's repeated all the way here, separating the driver and the passenger. Like, I kind of need a moment here. Then the console itself, where they've gone to the lengths of hiding the screen, they have, this is aluminum, and this here, crystal, and then you've got knobs for the HVAC, for the audio, and even more toggle switches down here, and then a toggle switch for putting the car in drive, and then even a toggle switch for the heated seats. But that is not the pièce de résistance. The pièce de résistance sits in front of you, and this is where my watch nerd comes out. This is like praying at the altar of timepiece art. This is 1, 2, 3, 4 different watches. The name of the car, again, I could be butchering the pronunciation, Tourbillon, that goes back to Swiss watchmaking. You can see the movements, like if you look at the back of my watch, you can see the movement of my watch here. You get that here. Now the car, we haven't discussed the propulsion system yet, but you're talking 1,800 horsepower, 1,000 of which comes from the gas engine, 800 comes from the EV. You look at the outside of this dial here, that goes up to 1,000. The inside goes up to 800, so it renders the horsepower output like a Swiss watch. Then you have all of the movement inside of the speedometer, and in the center, that's the tachometer. And then you have the EV meter, which tells you how much battery range you have left. That's rendered like a Swiss watch. And if that weren't enough, the steering wheel, notice, this is the airbag. There are no stalks connecting the airbag to the steering wheel. The steering wheel is connected to the steering column at the hub. So look at it as you turn it around. Now granted, this car, still a pre-production prototype, so you got a little bit of movement here, but this, it is otherworldly. One other small detail, what do they make all of this out of? This is titanium, and believe it or not, there are rubies. The red you see, rubies. And then these on the finished product will be blue anodized. Okay, so I'm gonna try to put aside my watch geek for a minute here. How do you capture all of the information from the EV side of this plug-in hybrid? That too is rendered by the Swiss watch. One of these dials here tells me how much range I have in my battery, and it looks like this. Then there are paddle shifters. This kind of detail, it goes to what the car is about. A little bit behind the scenes. I drove a Rolls-Royce Black Badge Spectre here. Lovely thing, especially the Salamanca blue. But that has too many screens. The interior is awash in screens, which will date that car probably in 3 years. This gets back to how do we inspire design, like we talked about at the top of the episode, in its details like that. Combine it with light weighting that extends to the interior, even where I have my butt right now, the seats. It's not that there's just carbon fiber in support. The seats don't move. To get into position, there are adjustable pedals. Now granted, the back angle can be adjusted. The reason why the seats don't move is they took the tracks out of the car so the seats can sit lower, so the overall car can sit lower, so you get the benefit of lowering the weight, so no electric seats, but you also get the aerodynamic benefit of the vehicle being wider and lower to the ground. Now while we're on the ground, you kind of want to look up, you want to see outside. Granted, visibility not great there, that's why you need the screen here, but they do offer this detail. It's one of the options they had in the Chiron, where you have the sky view roof, so the top of the doors would be glass as well. Okay, I don't know if I can say that I saved the best for last, but this is the car nerd part. So if you're familiar with a Bugatti, you are familiar with a W16. Why did they go to a V16? Well, that's naturally aspirated. There are no turbos. So they've decided to make it a V16. They punched it out to 8.3 liters. I just kind of giggle when I say that. And then it has an 8-speed dual clutch transmission. Okay, what about the plug-in hybrid side of it? There, you may remember we talked about the Yasa motors in the Revuelto. This is not Yasa motors. Bugatti, if you remember, is now partnered, or really it's run by Mate Rimac. And they do the motors in-house, as you can imagine, homegrown. There are 2 motors in front, 2 transmissions in front, and then there's an integrated starter generator motor in the rear. So like, for example, you put this thing in reverse, it's the rear electric motor. If you're running off just the gas, it's rear-wheel drive. Otherwise, if you're running in full plug-in hybrid mode, it is all-wheel drive. But this is where we get into like ridiculous car nerd details. Yes, the V16 engine was developed by Cosworth, but there's more. The intake plenum, like that Tourbillon, I want to steal and put on the wall of my hangar. Why? Not because it says Bugatti, not because it says V16, but it has the firing order mounted on the center of the intake plenum. Like, that blows the car nerd mind. If that were not enough, the throttle bodies are like little jewels, like little pieces of jewelry that sit and feed the plenum. Then on top of all of that, there's no glass. This is kind of a theme we're seeing. The Revuelto has done this, Ferraris have done this. So you look in and you don't see it, you kind of see the depth. Now granted, this one, it's not really a runner. This is a China doll, so you don't see all the details of the finished product. When this thing comes out, I'm probably gonna spend a lot of time just ogling this. And then we talked about this center high mount stop lamp. Then of course, we talked about Vmax, right? So you gotta have some sort of active aero. Now one would think the brain in the car would have to deploy the spoiler to get anywhere near 400 kilometers an hour. It sounds better in kilometers an hour as Vmax, but one would be wrong. That's where we get to the diffuser, which is probably the most beautiful part of this vehicle. The diffuser is unlike other diffusers. Those are usually like tacked on an afterthought to somehow channel the air away from the car. Remember, the whole point of a vehicle like this, and all sorts of fast cars, is you want to get the air around the car as efficiently as possible. That's also underneath the car. This diffuser, part of the structure of the vehicle, goes all the way to the back of the passenger compartment. Why is this important? The channels it creates are longer and wider, so bigger, so it can channel more air, and by channeling more air, it creates downforce underneath the car, hence no reason to deploy the spoiler and create more drag. Like, it's just like beyond mind-blowing, some of the details here. Then we get into what I would say is a second pièce de résistance. What you're looking at here, the design, I don't want to say the Chiron and the Veyron weren't pretty, they were gorgeous. I'd say that the back end of the Chiron was better than the back end of the Veyron, but this, okay, I'm Greek, I get it, but this is one of the most beautiful butts I've ever seen. Now it's from this angle we get into full car nerd mode, because look at the width of the tire, but more importantly, look at how it's exposed. From what I understand, the chief designer of Bugatti races Porsches. But if you look at this, you can clearly tell he loves like old Lolas and obviously old GT40s, because that's kind of what's going on here. But believe it or not, there is a way to make this look even cooler. There is a Pur Sang Package, a pure blood package. I'm probably butchering the pronunciation there. But what they do is they add like aero details, like flicks in the front or details over here on the active aero. But most importantly, you can change the exhaust here to dual quad exhaust. They can be finished in aluminum or black, but it is otherworldly. And so we arrive at that point, $4.6 million. Now, before we descend into all the pearl clutching, a couple of data points. Number one, they're only going to make 250. Number two, all of them were sold out when the car was announced. Now that we have that out of the way, there were two lessons I took from this rather unique experience. First and foremost, I spent some time with the chief marketing officer of Bugatti while I was there. And yes, we talked about the car, but we also talked about the whole ownership experience of a car like this. Now, anyone that has an enthusiast car understands like OEM events and car club events and all that kind of stuff. I do that with my car. I'm kind of lucky enough to glom on to the Ferrari club, and they get me into these military car shows. It's a wonderful way to kind of share the car hobby with all these different people, especially those that ensure our freedom. But the Bugatti folks, they do something entirely different. One example was they do a runway run with their cars, but instead of like renting out a private airport, they go to Cape Canaveral and drive their cars where the government launches space vehicles. And then number two, they do a whole deal where they take their car on the track. Now, they could go and say, oh my God, we're gonna drive our car on the Bahrain F1 track. That would be easy, right? But instead, they picked Las Vegas, a temporary track. They go to the organizers and say, hey, can we drive our cars on your track before the race car drivers drive their cars? And they said, okay. I'm sure there was a huge fee to pay, but these are the kind of special experiences that come with a $4.6 million car. Now granted, not free, you probably pay extra for it, but you see where I'm going. The second lesson And this is far more important. There's a timelessness to this car. You don't get it until you see it in person. Again, I'm not a Bugatti guy. I wasn't until I saw this car. Why? Because when you see the thing in person, you totally get it. You understand it's not about technology, it's about timelessness first, and technology to enhance everything about timelessness. Like, for example, those 3 electric motors are homegrown by Rimac, not the Yasa motors like in the Revuelto. And that's where we arrive at the wish list, but not for Bugatti. Rather, every other OEM is trying to make a fancy, bespoke, performance, whatever kind of car that's trying to be important, timeless, or be some sort of a milestone. Take the lesson from the Bugatti. Don't put technology in a car for technology's sake. As a matter of fact, try something different. Maybe you can't afford to do a couple of $100,000 IP, which is probably what that Tourbillon costs. Rather, how about calling like IWC, Breitling, somebody like that, to make gauges for your super hyper performance car. And oddly, this is the point where cars like these are more like sports rather than automotive, in that their creators are thinking where the puck is going. In this case, the collector car market. Think 25 years in the future, RM auctions, Gooding Christie's. You see something like this where they've actually put timelessness ahead of technology. You think back to when the car came out and say, that still looks good today. But I'm just one man. This is the point of the episode. I turn around to you guys to opine in the comments below or via our social media, MotoManTV all in word, MotoManTV all in word, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And with that, I would highly suggest you check out our Lamborghini Revuelto episode to understand where the technology works there and where it somewhat falls down. Till I see you in the next episode, bis später.